So something cool just happened. I was over on Lichess.org, I was solving some tactics, and I just got served a puzzle from a Magnus Carlsen game. So I thought it would be kind of cool to go over not only this position, it's white to play and win, by the way, if you're trying to solve it in your head. And I thought it would be cool to not only show this position, but also maybe we can go back in time, we can watch this entire game, see exactly how we got here, and then I am going to try to attempt to solve this position for myself. And I'm going to give you just a little bit more time so that you can figure this out. I want to just let you know, the only other thing that's on my mind is I've actually been trying to make a video all day. I've been trying to beat Stockfish again. I got another dubious gambit I'm trying to beat Stockfish with, but I couldn't do it today, and I really wanted to make a video, so I thought, you know what? This is my chance. We got a tactic. We got Magnus Carlsen. Hopefully, this is something cool, and it's something we've never done before, so if you want more tactics, let me know, and maybe we can make more videos like this in the future. But also subscribe, because we also got a lot of Stockfish content coming soon. Now, this game came from this position. It was a French defense, and to be a little bit more specific, this came from the Rubinstein variation of the French, and this is actually going to be kind of interesting to see from my point of view, because whenever you face this, whenever you're going up against the Rubinstein, it can be very annoying, because if you ask a computer, white is always slightly better, but black is so solid that this actually can be obnoxious. And you know what else is obnoxious? Lichess is blinking at me. What is this all about? I'm going to get immensely distracted if this blue blinking continues. Knight to f3. I assume, you know what I actually assume? This is, I didn't realize this about Lichess puzzles, but I guess if you are not at the end position, it blinks blue to remind me that this isn't the actual puzzle. So I guess that I'm not wasting a bunch of time trying to solve this position when I should be at the interesting puzzle. That is interesting, but also that's insanely distracting. So I might have to edit that blue out in case it's bugging you as much as it's bugging me. Well, you know what? Look at this on-the-fly YouTubing. You've never seen it done like this before. Look at this. I got a solution to your problem. This doesn't solve my problem, but look at that. If it was bugging you, shouldn't be bugging you anymore. Look at that. I had a color block. Okay, let's get back to business, though. Let's stop wasting time. It's the Rubinstein French. This is what we got going on. Knight to f6 is played, and the first interesting moment here is knight to g3, because this is kind of known to be sort of an inaccuracy, but yet it's an attempt by white, and this is a bullet game, obviously. It's an attempt by white to try to keep more pieces on the board so that whenever there is an attack that's going down, you're going to have more pieces on the board. However, the knight on g3, at least right now, doesn't make an incredible impression. So I just know from having studied this with computers that it's always going to recommend taking this knight, and that would be the main line. But this is perhaps a more aggressive way for white to continue, and now black plays pawn to b6. Presumably Magnus is just trying to get this bishop out to the b7 square. Bishop to d3. Bishop to b7, castles, bishop to d6, and this is a very aggressive square for the bishop. I guess the other option was to go to e7, but on d6, maybe if black's able to castle, maybe he can liberate with e5, something like this. Black is going to be playing for one of these breaks, and this is obviously just a very aggressive square to post up a bishop. Now comes rook to e1, and a lot of this early battle is going to be centered around this e5 square, so black gets castled, knight hops in right away to e5, c5 is what was played, knight takes d7. And this is actually kind of an interesting moment, because maybe what white is saying, like obviously you don't have to just take right now and trade this knight away, but perhaps you're saying if you take with a knight, and in the game Magnus took with a queen, but he might be saying, and I can't make moves on the board because this is not an analysis board, this is a tactic, if knight to d7, perhaps white is thinking of playing queen to h5, and maybe the idea is that even if your knight comes back to f6, the queen is going to stay lurking around the king side, and bishop to g5 is coming. I'm imagining in my mind, just kind of going over the game, that that might have been what white was insisting. So instead, black decides to take back with the queen. Now we see bishop to g5. White is getting ready to potentially shatter the structure, which would make an attack a lot easier. Also, knight is coming in at some moment. But instead, we see black ignore that threat and make a much stronger threat of his own. The queen comes to c6 and creates a battery where he's actually threatening a checkmate. So white has to find a good way to get out of mate. He comes up with knight to e4. And after takes, we see a lot of exchanges. The queen goes back to c7. There's a little bit of pressure now on this h2 pawn, but we see this trade. So now black doesn't have time to take on h2, instead has to take back here, and we see yet another set of trades. And this is kind of like a normal starting position for like a Rubinstein French. Very often, you're going to see a whole lot of trades, and the real question is, how does white continue to get an advantage from here? Well, in this game, we see queen to e2, which honestly, for me, as a caveman that just likes to put my queen really, really close to the enemy king. This is the kind of move that I think would be very difficult to play. But now Magnus plays h6. The bishop goes back to h4, and now b5. This is like a very high-level move from Magnus Carlsen. Surprise, surprise. He played a really strong move, potentially. We can go back and check with the engine to see if this is the right plan. But b5 is a very interesting idea, and black is essentially going for some sort of minority attack against the queen side. You got this 3-on-2. So black plays pawn to b5 and potentially will play pawn to b4. So if white was thinking of expanding on the queen side somehow, this has kind of been delayed by black's plan, which is very fascinating. So white, on the other hand, is just going to be swinging a rook in, and we're going to see white is actually going for a massive attack. He's trying to bring the rook up and over all the way to g3, which is what happens in this game. So after rook f to c8, we do see rook to d3. Here comes the rook. It's going to be making some pressure against the king. b4 is played, further constricting these three pawns. And if black is able to avoid getting checkmated, maybe he'll end up with some sort of favorable endgame in terms of eventually breaking through on the queen side. But immediately, white plays bishop to g3, and now he's introducing ideas such as bishop to f6. Maybe in the future, the queen will also be able to join in, come into g4, and eventually we should be able to make some sort of threats against the black king. So first of all, the bishop goes back to f8 in anticipation that maybe g7 will come under fire, but white here just decides to put the bishop on f6 anyways, and there should be a tactic here because I've already kind of looked at this position. And now after queen to d5, white is winning. So this is it. This is your final opportunity to potentially solve this position. So if you haven't already, this is your last chance to pause the video because I'm now hopefully going to spoil and give you the right answer. Now, I do know that kind of when you're going over tactics, the theme here of this has to be an attack. Like, obviously, there's no loose pieces. We're not looking for trying to, like, win some hanging piece somewhere. It's going to have to be, how are we going to attack this king? How are we going to get this king more exposed? And the key central focal point is this g7 square. So I have to imagine, I'm going to give the answer now. Very last chance. You still can pause. You still can pause. You still can pause. You can remove this g7 pawn. So I'm imagining the way to open up this position is to sacrifice the rook on g7, and then after this bishop takes back, play queen to g4. This is what I'm imagining the solution is. Now again, this is not an analysis board, so you'll have to do all of this in your head, but if rook takes g7, the bishop will take back, otherwise, what are you doing? Then comes queen to g4, and I think black has a serious problem because, well, you can give up your queen, but that's obviously losing a lot of material, but also, if we get back to this position, we play queen to g4. The alternative is to try to run away, something like king to f8, but then I'm imagining the full solution goes queen takes g7, king goes over to e8, and even there we can give this check, which will move the king from the defense of this pawn. We chomp up this guy, and that has just got to be super winning for white. So I'm going to play the move on the board now, and let's see if I'm right. Rook takes g7 was the correct move. Again, it's a tactic, so you just want to take a couple extra seconds to make sure you're right, especially when you're recording a YouTube video and you don't want to embarrass yourself. But queen to g4 looks like a very strong move. And again, if the king ran away, my plan was to take this with the queen, but if queen goes to g5, I can just take that. Look at that! This was indeed the solution. Now let's look at the whole game and let's look at see if there's any other interesting lines. Come on, computer, you can do it. YouTube is waiting. We'll give Stockfish... Oh, no. You'll never know the solution. This was it. Why do I have all these moves on? All right, whatever. It has a lot of lines on it. I'm not going to let any more distractions get in my way. All of this is probably pretty normal for the most part. There was a couple interesting decisions. One was after knight takes d7. Queen takes actually is the strongest move. I was thinking to myself, if here was the idea to play queen to h5. Maybe not, because after knight to f6, we got queen to h4 with some ideas of going here. But the computer will solve all of these by taking this. And if I were to take back here in order to do this, I would be losing a pawn. So the players in the game figured this out much better than me. But instead, we see queen takes, bishop to g5. All of this is very good. This is a very solid game so far. Most of these moves matching up with the computer. Very strong game. And all of this, everything's totally fine. Everything they do is fine. I'm a genius. Queen to g4, maybe better. I'm just a caveman. I just put my queen close to the king. b5. Was this also the move? This is one of the top moves. Not the very top, at least at this depth, but it's a very good move. Pawn to b5. Rook comes in. Rook comes up and over. B4, best move. So black is actually doing well here. Maybe bishop d4 is the better way of doing it. He goes all the way back, bishop to f6, queen comes in, and this is actually where the mistake was made. Up to this was all played very well by Magnus. He needs to play rook to c5, so that now if you take here, this just simply doesn't work, because in the end of it, you can play rook to g5. Very hard to spot, especially in a 1-minute game where I don't know how much time they had. But there you go. That was a fun little tactic from a Magnus game. Last line to consider is here, but something like this is insanely winning for white. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed that, and if you want more tactic videos, let me know. Make sure to subscribe. Bye!